Welcome to the National Civil Rights Museum's Imagine in America podcast. Today's episode is Fighting for Voting Rights, and our guests are Symone Townsend and Derrick Johnson. Ms. Sanders Townsend is a political strategist and author who by her early 30s had become the youngest presidential press secretary on record, published her first book, and served as deputy assistant to the president and senior advisor and chief spokesperson to Vice President Kamala Harris. A former political commentator for CNN, you can now catch her Saturdays on MSNBC's The Weekend. Derrick Johnson has been the president and CEO of the NAACP since 2017, having served on its national board and as state president in Mississippi State Conference. He is a veteran activist, defending political rights and equitable education, and leads organizations to improve the quality of life for Black Americans through civic engagement, training, and initiative. Welcome to the Imagine in America podcast. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot that it was only 2017. NAACP been doing a lot.
You know, I done had this gray hair back then.
Okay, yes.
COVID years. COVID years.
When
That
you do
is
the work
wild.
of Derrick Johnson, it happens in a robust way.
I guess so.
Okay.
Absolutely. You all see a lot. You've seen a lot, and you see a lot. It's an interesting time when we think about voting in this country. Can you speak to your sense of how our society thinks about voting? And feel free to break it down into any categories that you think make sense. But I'm really curious to hear, how do you think voting manifests, if you will, in our country today?
Well, I defer to the president of an organization that was literally founded in 1909, and my favorite story about the NAACP is when they had the flag that flew over their New York office, and they raised the flag and it said, "A man was lynched yesterday."
Yep.
And that is the history of this country, and that is the history of voting rights and activism work that has gone on. And so obviously I spent a long time in electoral politics in my former life, and now we talk about it on television and engage the conversations. But it is really, in my experience, it's always been the work on the ground and the organizations like the NAACP that are literally leading the way and helping provide a framework for how we understand what is actually happening in our country.
Indeed.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, voting is the right to unlock all the other rights. If you have access to voting, then you can get to the questions of criminal justice reform, quality education, so on and so on. So for NAACP, 115 years old, we understand at the tip of the pyramid of any democracy is the ability of citizens to exercise their voice through their vote. For Black folks, we understand that voting is currency. And when we collectively deposit our currency jointly, we get the governance that we are entitled to. And so today is really important. Symone talked about our campaign around lynching. We were created in 1909 in a backdrop of a series of lynchings across the country, and there was a race riot that brought the Black group, W.B. Du Bois, William Monroe Trotter, Ida B. Wells, with the white group to come up with NAACP. But the white group wasn't even white, because during this period of time, if you was Jewish, you were not considered white. If you was Italian, you wasn't white. If you was Catholic, you wasn't white. It was only white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. But when they ran out of white people, they started inviting new groups of whites that create the social construct we know now. That's all as a result of voting. In a democracy, your vote is your currency, and who control the democracy control the money through tax policy.
The way you just described that, I don't hear voting described in a sort of in the atmosphere, if you will, in that way. There are all other kinds of dimensions, I think, that how voting historically gets described today in a different manner than historically how it has been. How do we make that sort of powerful voice resonate with people today?
And accessible. I think I mean, when you say that voting is the right that unlocks every other right, it's like, oh, it makes sense. And so then you eliminate, we automatically eliminate the, well, why vote, why not vote conversation, because we're starting with voting is the right that unlocks every other right. So obviously we want the right to unlock, so regardless of who you voted for in the last election, voting is the right that unlocks all other rights. I just, when obviously we're in the midst of as we have this conversation, barreling towards the conventions for the Republicans and the Democrats as we look towards a general election in November 2024. And across the country right now, I do believe that people, it doesn't feel accessible for some communities and some folks, especially sometimes when you talk about younger people. Not that there are, when I say accessible, I'm not talking about the barriers that still exist to voting all across this country. We can talk about that. But it feels disconnected to their everyday reality. Mm-hmm. And so as we were having the conversations here at the conference today, one of the things that really resonated with me when we were talking with the Sabrina Fulton and the really the leaders of the movement who have been personally affected by police violence because they've lost a loved one, really bridging that gap between the politicians and the people. Mm-hmm. And you have to make voting, you have to connect it to, if you like the ability to have clean water in your neighborhood, green lettuce at your local grocery store, that is political, and it is connected to who the elected officials are, because those decisions, there's a direct line, but you have to draw the line for people. And I think nowadays we automatically just assume everybody should know, but everybody does not know, and that's why organizations such as Derrick's are so important, because they are doing the work of helping educate people so that they can make informed decisions at the ballot box.
It sounds like you just visited the National Civil Rights Museum, Symone, because that is so core to what we try to do in the methodology by which we tell the story. Mm-hmm. It's obviously rooted in our mission to do it through with an emphasis through the lens of Dr. King, but it's about being a catalyst to educate and be an influence, if you will, for positive social change. And what we know is, throughout the story that we tell at the National Civil Rights Museum, you can see those connections that you just described. You can see the development of the NAACP, Derrick, and how it influenced people to see the power of voting, to see the recognition that one's economic status or education were secondary and tertiary to their humanity, if you will, or their citizenship, right? And so I love the idea of making it simple, right? And taking it back to the basics.
But it wasn't that long ago, too. I think that's the other part.
That's the real
we talk about the civil rights movement like it was someone said the other day to me, all the photos are in black and white, and it makes people feel as though it is so much longer. Right. We are but a generation removed from the civil rights movement.
It's funny. Born and raised in Detroit. Actually, my folks are from West Tennessee. Like most folks from West Tennessee, migrated to Detroit. But I went to school in Mississippi. Yeah. Went to HBCU, Tougaloo College. It was just fascinating when I get on campus and people I were reading about in the history books were on campus. Yeah. And that's how I got, intoxicated with doing this type of work. Tougaloo's mission is around social justice, but I'm on campus and Stokely Carmichael comes back every year. Kwame Ture.
That's crazy.
I'm on campus in the first SNCC recruits that Bob Moses, who will be on campus, were still on campus. It wasn't that long. No. And more importantly, even in Dr. King's speech on the March on Washington, it wasn't about a dream. It was about coming to the banks of justice with a check that was stamped insufficient funds, because the democracy that was promised, the social contract we call the constitutions, were being denied to citizens who took up arms, defeated the Confederacy, and saved the Union. Lincoln didn't save us. We saved the Union through fighting right here in Memphis. When Sherman Army marched through here, it was Africans, because they were not citizens, who took up arms and saved this Union. And that's what that march was about.
And he came to Memphis for sanitation workers, the exploitation of sanitation workers?
It was always the economics.
Always.
And so even as we talk about right now, and this particular, and I mean, we're going to be talking about this presidential election, and then there's a governor's race somewhere in the off year after that in Virginia, and then before you know, people are going to be talking about the midterms, and the cycle continues. But it has always been about the economics of it. I mean, heck, Dr. King's dream wasn't that everybody could just, black people were able to sit at the lunch counter that white people could sit at. It was that we could own the establishment. There was an economic piece to it. There's an economic piece to it now, and I really do believe, I mean, if you look at the data, oftentimes, when I used to do campaigns, you know, people would say, well, you know, when you go into black communities, when you talk about policing and voting rights, and I'm like, yes, but black people care about the economy too. We pay taxes. Black people also, we care about health care. Like, black folks own businesses. We care about entrepreneurship and all of those things. The same things folks are going to other communities and talking about. Those are things that are central to black people's lives that they are thinking about as they are deciding how they are going to engage in this experiment that is American democracy, and if they're going to participate at the ballot box.
You know, it's funny you said it's about economics. It has always was about economics. Civil rights movement is a three-legged stool. Access to voting, so we have a voice in democracy. Economics, so we're not exploited as cheap or free labor. And our future aspirations, education. That's the three-legged stool. And then everything comes between there, whether it's housing, things of that nature. And you think about the current economy. It's not enough to say, oh, the stock market is doing good and the price of bread is more expensive. It's not good to say we have the most progressive economy. Look at the global landscape when the price of gas is up. For black people, it is the everyday economic reality of how they exist. It's the everyday aspirations they have for their children. And it's the everyday belief that they actually have a voice in how policies are impacted, that how policies are done to impact their quality of life.
I'm thinking about the linkage of what you just said and what we've been talking about, and the word hope just keeps popping in my head around the hope of what could happen and should happen, and so those baselines.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Elections are won or lost on 5 words or less. When the black community, progressive community have a message of hope, yes we can, we win. But if we lack a message of hope and they have a fear message that supersedes our hope message, they win. So we can't talk about the negative narrative. We got to talk about what's possible. And in this current political environment, we're winning. How do we know? Because they're becoming much more and more desperate in terms of what they're doing. Fact has gone out the door. Reality has gone out the door because we are making strides in progress. Is it where we should or want to be? No, but it's far better than what we've ever had.
Black and white photos, but it hadn't been that long ago. We will blink and we will be in 2030. I think about 2030 through the lenses of a 10 or 12-year-old. And I think about they will be voter eligible, if you will. The 12-year-olds will be. What are some of the lessons that you would want them to have now as they are maturing, if you will, so that when they are eligible to vote, what kind of obligation will they have or should they have?
Look, I think that for younger people, I'm a millennial.
Me too.
Oh, okay. You on the older cusp of millennial?
When
was you? Oh, okay. Okay. I want y'all to know the oldest millennials are 43 and the youngest millennials are 28. Y'all do with that what y'all will. Okay. Y'all do with that what you will.
Me and my son.
Well, there you. Okay. So, yeah, you know, it's the fountain of youth. You know, that's the AI situation over there. For the first time I could vote was in 2008. I was a freshman in college. Okay, and since I have been able to vote, since I've turned 18 and since I've been voting, Trayvon Martin happened, Michael Brown happened, there was a recession, the housing prices were just, people lost their homes, it was very inexpensive, and then it was very expensive, then it got inexpensive, then it got expensive again. Somebody paid a lot of money for me to go to school, and I took out a lot of scholarships only to graduate, and people not even wanting to pay me a fraction of what I paid to go to school. And so all of these things have happened since, a pandemic, since the millennial generation themselves have been voting. The folks younger than myself, the Gen Z, the folks after them, what do they call them, Alpha now? We just started the alphabet back over. So I just would argue that the lesson for the folks who in 2030 will be the me in 2008 should be that our participation has in fact been the only way to ever change things. Not participating has never brung us results. And it has always been a cross-generational coalition of young people that have pushed everything forward, an inside-outside strategy, people willing to go into government service, people willing to organize on the outside. But all of that, none of that matters unless you vote. So voting is the first step. It is one of the most crucial tools. It is the most crucial tool in the toolbox of social justice, that if you don't use it, all the other tools mean nothing. You can march all you want, you can advocate all you want, get all the little data y'all want to get. Who did you elect to office?
So I'm going to follow up and ask another version.
Because I'm burning in response to what she said, because she hit on some really important stuff. One,
then go to that.
Intergenerational organizing is our success model.
Yeah.
We don't have time for us versus us paradigm based on generation, gender, anything else. Secondly, 2008. She voted during that hope era, but what our young people need to know is how we got there so they don't lose faith, because 2008, 2012, we voted. 2016, we sat down and we lost. So we got to get there. So the younger generation understand that they didn't wake up and everything is as is, that there was struggles to make it happen. And then the most important thing I just heard her say, that the power of voting dictate the quality of our life and our experiences. And so whether or not it's paying student loans back, or you have to take out of student loans, or what options you have in terms of your career path, should not be an impediment because of your race. You should be able to pursue those courses. That only comes through public policy, which is driven by voting. That's really important. Our young people, they need to know that.
It sounds like civil and human rights and social justice to me. And making progress in that space is what we're all committed to doing and obligated to do. Last question. If the percentage of eligible voters increased by 10%, how would that influence and affect the political landscape in our country?
Well, which eligible voters now? Because to be clear, everybody's not voting now. Only a fraction of people in America vote, even at the highest levels in the last two elections, the midterm election and then the presidential in 2020. Record turnout in both of those elections, and that's why every year people talk about voter registration. Somebody asked me last week, they said, why are people still doing voter registration? I said, because all y'all not voting. There are so many people in America that are, in fact, not registered to vote. White, Black, Latino, Asian American, indigenous, or otherwise. And so I would just argue that when the people
we got to back up to registration.
Well, yeah, because everybody's not even but there are people, there are unregistered, what do they call them in the focus groups, Derrick? Unregistered voters. Because these are people that if they were, or unregistered persuadables, because if they were registered, these would be target voters.
Yeah.
But I would just argue that record turnout in the midterm elections last year, record turnout in the 2020 presidential election. I think we are going to see I think we're going to see record turnout this year. The question is, who is in fact turning out to vote?
So, percentage-wise, in 2022 in August, there was a primary elections right here in Shelby County for a DA. The DA in Shelby County served 8-year terms. We targeted that to support turnout of the Black community, and we've seen that if we increase turnout about 4.5% to 7%, we can impact the outcome. We're nonpartisan, we don't choose. We invested over $200,000 in 3 organizations in addition to the Memphis branch, and we hired a local Black contractor to do the canvas work. Black folks know how to talk to each other to turn out to vote. We recognize that the Memphis branch is one of our strongest branches, but some places they ain't gonna go. They ain't going to some of the hood. So we identify groups that's gonna do that. As a result of that, we got rid of a DA who was horrible. She wouldn't recognize DNA evidence. She was listed as one of the top 5 worst DAs in the country. What happened as a result of that? When we seen that video of those Memphis police officers brutalizing that young brother, the people of Shelby County spoke. They put in a different DA who within 2 weeks, they were suspended and they were charged with a crime. That's the power of voting, and that was about 4.5 to 7% increase.
It matters.
It matters. But it don't just happen.
It
so
doesn't just happen.
People they spend money to turn out voters. There is targeted outreach, data and the numbers matter, and infrastructure matters. So that's what I'm always looking and watching for. And you know, people can say what they want about the NAACP, but I think they have honed their infrastructure when it comes to a turnout apparatus.
Well, the one thing that the museum I love, we have to get away from egocentric organizing and get to community-centric organizing. It is not about what you say, is what you do, and what you do is much more powerful than any words that can be spoken.
Well, we stand to be a place where all are welcome, but you got to do the work.
Got to do the work.
Gotta do the work.
And if you don't do the work, then the people who do the work are going to rule the day. So.
Oh yeah.
Thank you both. Your leadership, your voice, your perspective, your passion is so important to all of us. And thank you so much. The National Civil Rights Museum considers you great resources, and we will continue to partner with you in the future.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. We encourage our listeners to subscribe to the museum's Imagine in America podcast series and follow the National Civil Rights Museum on our social media platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by the National Civil Rights Museum, located at the Lorraine Motel, the assassination site of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It chronicles key episodes of the American Civil Rights Movement, examines today's global civil and human rights issues, provokes thoughtful debate, and serves as a catalyst for positive social change.